Hi everybody, it's Laura from Green Tree, and today I'm talking about food dyes. There's a lot to cover, and I'm only going to just kind of be able to hit the surface of this topic, but I'm going to do my best. And if any questions come up, throw them in the comments and I will try to research them more for you later. So this is going to be the basics about different ways of coloring foods. And we're not just talking about, food coloring that you can add yourself. We're talking about the kind that is found in the products you buy every day, like your snacks and your cereals and all of your sort of pre-made processed foods. So first, I'm going to go back a ways. I guess food coloring, or augmenting the natural color of food, has been happening since ancient Egypt. It didn't happen so much during the Middle Ages, and then as industrialization happened, people started moving to cities and larger populations congregated in one area. Food was shipped in from outside. That's when food coloring really started to kick into gear. Because when something was sent from the countryside to the city over a long period of time, it might be adulterated, the quality might be degraded, and they would want it to look more attractive. So that's when you started having, at first, just natural types of colorings. Things like turmeric or paprika, herbs and spices and things that would give color to food. But because there wasn't a lot of scientific testing and people didn't really know the effects of some of these things, one of the most popular types of food colorings was a variety of different minerals and heavy metals. Things like lead being particularly popular because it would give things a nice red color. So at some point, people started to realize that having a lot of lead and copper and things added to your food to make it prettier was actually really bad for you. And so that's when they started regulating. This was probably in the late 1800s or so, and what they did at first was to have a list of things that you couldn't put in your food. So that's when they started saying, no, you're not allowed to use lead in commercially produced food, which I think was a step in the right direction. But later, in the more modern era, post-1900 up into the 1960s, what they started switching to was a list of these things are good, these things are generally regarded as safe, or GRAS. After doing different types of testing, they came to this positive listing about food colorings, which I think was a much nicer way to do it, in that we know that the additives that are being put in have gone through at least some type of scrutiny. Now, there are currently a number of different ways of classifying these things, like based on the country. For example, the colorings would be listed differently on something, well, this wine doesn't have any colorings, but on, say, a beverage, they would be listed differently in America than they would be in England or other parts of the EU. So they're going to have different numbering systems, and other countries might have totally separate systems from that. Those are the only ones I looked at extensively. So here, there are 9 synthetic food colorings that are approved for use in our food. 7 that are very commonly used, 1 that's only allowed to color citrus peels to make them a brighter orange, and another one that is kind of an old-fashioned coloring that they used to use mostly in sausage casings and hot dogs that isn't so much on the market anymore, but it's still considered usable. And you never know, it might pop back up again. So it's just good to know that one's out there. Now, some food colorings don't have to be regulated at all. And those are food colorings that come from natural things like beets or turmeric, carmine, annatto. If it comes from something that would be considered edible, if it comes from an animal, if it comes from a plant, to a lesser extent some minerals, then it is considered usable and safe. So those things don't actually have to be regulated in the same way, and there are a lot of natural food colorings out there. So I'm going to kind of go through why you might want to use natural food colorings. Because the approved colorings, the 9 approved colorings, are chemically derived, the reason that they do that is because you get a more consistent color. So I'm going to show you something natural here. So you can see these are hibiscus petals, right? And you can see there are light portions and there are dark portions, and the batch in this jar might differ slightly in color from the batch in the next jar. They're not as consistent, even though they can be somewhat standardized, and that's why some companies do choose these synthetic and chemical-based colors, because every single time, every batch is the same. Now, the reason you might want color in your food is because our brains associate certain colors with certain flavors. So for example, if you've got a naturally colored product like this, you're going to see the pink and you're going to assume berry. Your brain sees pink and red and thinks of strawberries and raspberries and sweet fruity flavors. So that's why you might want to have these in your food. In a savory dish, your brain is going to see red and think of savory and tangy, like a tomato type of flavor. And that's what we associate with. And so that's why these foods are going to be colored. It makes your brain actually think they taste better, which is kind of a cool thing. In order to be able to enjoy your food more, you want it to be brightly colored. And that's part of the reason that having a multicolored plate makes your meal so much more appealing than when it's all sort of beige. But like I said, these synthetic colors are more consistent, but they might have some potential issues. There aren't any consensuses or studies that have said for sure any of the currently approved colors cause issues. But one of the more common concerns people have is attention issues and hyperactivity that some people experience when they consume especially red dyes. Now, there are some studies indicating that this may be the case, especially red number 40. It was banned for a while and then it was back. It was never banned in the US, but it was banned in parts of the EU for a while and then it came back again. And it's one of the more common ones that people are trying to avoid, especially for kids. So it's nice that you can get brightly colored, like attractive foods like these gummies that we have for kids that are colored with these natural colorings. One of the more common colorings that you'll see in things like this and the cereal that I showed you earlier is beet juice or beet powder. As you can see, even though this is not standardized, this is red. And if you've ever, cut a beet on a porous cutting board, like a wooden cutting board, or gotten it on your hands, you'll know that this is a pretty bright red or pink, if you use less of it, color that can easily stain your food and make it look that beautiful berry shade. But the trick is, when you're using these natural colors, it's not going to taste like berries, it's going to taste like beets. And so companies are finding ways to standardize and extract some of those flavor compounds while keeping the color. If you want to go straight up natural, you can go ahead and use the beet juice or the beet powder right in your baking. The nice thing about beets is it is kind of sweet and you can use just a little bit and get a pretty bright pink. So if you go low on your amount of beet that you add, you can still get a really nice bright color. Other options, if you want to do red, for example, would be something like hibiscus. This is really nice in baking because it has kind of a bright, tangy, citrusy, berry type of flavor to it. But as you can see, this is chunky. So if I wanted to use something natural like this that has pieces in it, when I go to actually color something with this, what I'll do is take the liquid portion of the recipe, whether it's a milk or a water or juice, whatever it might be, and I will soak my tea or other natural product like this in it for an hour up to overnight until the flavor or the color is as strong as I want it to be, and then strain out these chunks. And you can still get a nice pink color that way, get some of the flavor of this that is fruity and pleasant without having these chewy bits in your food. So it is entirely possible to get some of these colors without having to use artificial dyes. Another one that can be used a lot is turmeric. I prefer it in savory dishes, but like the beet juice, even though it has a strong flavor, you can use just a pinch and turn something yellow. So my suggestion is if you're making something sweet and you want to use turmeric to dye it, less is more. Start with the smallest amount that you can and then add a little more if you need to. Now, you can also get things that are going to be pre-made with these natural colors. For example, it is totally possible to get dye-free sprinkles, either the cute little candy kind or the pretty little sugar kind. You can get these without food dyes, and this is great, especially if you're working with a group of kids that you don't know if they have any allergies or sensitivities to colors. So if you're doing a birthday party, sending a snack to school or something, and you don't want anybody to miss out on the treats, then these are a really good idea. There's also sort of an in-between point. You can get liquid natural food colorings like this. These are entirely food-based. They are, let's see, We've got citric acid, vegetable juice, not citric acid. We've got vegetable juice to make the red, which is, it's probably beet juice. We have turmeric, we have spirulina. Spirulina is pretty much the only natural food color that makes blue. There isn't really another food that they have been able to extract enough blue from to make coloring. But the trick with these is because they have been standardized like that, they have been solvents have been used on them in order to make them be consistently the same color all the time. So these are kind of in between. They're still natural ingredients, but they have been subjected to some processes that aren't as natural as just using the foods themselves. So it kind of depends on where you fall with that. These are really easy to use. They have a nice variety of colors. Like you can see, it comes in red and yellow and green and blue. So you can kind of mix your own, but they are a little more processed. Now, if you're ever looking at a naturally colored food and you're not sure whether the ingredient in it is safe or not, we do have this super handy book, which, sorry, it's backwards, guys, but a Consumer's Dictionary of Food Additives. And we are happy to look things up for you in this and tell you what the research is on that particular add-in so far. A lot of them are kind of on the cusp, where there's some indication that they might not be the safest thing, but there's no proof, so they're still in a lot of foods. Others are pretty much fine, very natural, like using your beet juice, like using carrot juice. Carrot juice is actually a pretty common coloring. There's even carrot juice in this cereal here, but it doesn't typically impart a flavor because they're mostly extracting the beta carotene, which gives you kind of a bright orangey yellow, similar to turmeric, but without the strong flavor. So we can look those up in this dictionary for food additives if you're interested. We can give you suggestions on which natural products you can use to just flavor something without going that route. They usually won't be quite as bright as artificially colored foods, but you don't have to worry about the sensitivities that can come otherwise. And some of it's just experimenting. So for example, if you want your tomato sauce to be brighter in color, I add red wine. You add like a half a cup of red wine to a batch of tomato sauce and cook it for a while. It will intensify and brighten the color naturally without you having to add anything else to it. So it's a really easy way to brighten up and intensify the color of a sauce. You're making a curry, add some turmeric. You're making some kind of baked good, infuse that liquid with tea. It's not too hard to add color while adding flavor and keeping it natural. So that's kind of the breakdown on the basics of food dyes and food additives, why you might consider avoiding some of them, some natural alternatives. And if you want to come down and try some of these naturally colored foods, I'm going to be sampling some of the sweet stuff, the cereals and the little gummies until about 5:30. So you can ask me more questions, you can stop in and try some of these, and I would be happy to see you. In the meantime, I hope you guys are staying as cozy as I am, and I hope you're having a great Tuesday. Bye.